Minasan konnichiwa, welcome to the board game dojo where it is really cold and snowy outside, and so I am inside, curled up in a blanket and in my pajamas, ready to play some games on our kotatsu. This is something that we really like to do, so we put together a list of 5 games that we recommend for you to be able to curl up and play some games on your coffee table as well. So let's get into it. Our first game of the day is a perfect game to go with your cup of joe or cup of tea, and that is Coffee Shop Pocket, a game in which you can play by yourself or with one other person. In Coffee Shop Pocket, you are playing as a barista trying to complete all of your customers' orders before time runs out. You'll do this by placing cards in different cups, needing to put the ingredients to make each order in a specific order. Once you complete those orders, they might be worth points, and some cards you can choose to instead use special effects, because if you go through the deck 3 times without completing every order, then you lose the game. But actually, don't worry, it's not so much of a stressful game to complete the game, but rather how many points you're going to get. It's actually a game in which you're not going to really play it back to back to back, but rather you put on a cup of coffee in the morning, you get it set up because it only takes about a minute to do as such, and then you drink your cup of coffee to see if you get a better score than you did yesterday. Did you use the cards more efficiently than yesterday? Did maybe a card you used for its special effect yesterday you can instead use for points today? It's a game that doesn't overstay its welcome. In fact, you'll probably be done with this game by the time your coffee even cools down. Thanks to its tiny form factor, its great aesthetic, and just an overall pleasant experience, this has been a go-to solo experience for me in the morning as I'm first waking up to start the day. Speaking of pleasant experiences, let's talk about a pleasant theme depending on the theme that you have. I have the version called Hygge, but you might know it as Sashi and Sashi's Before the Guests Arrive. In either version, you will be collecting sets, either of things that need to be picked up by various members of the family, or various things to keep warm in the winter. On every turn, you either have to take a whole row or a whole column, and then you have to have the right person be able to either pick it up or wear those items. But you have to be careful because when the game ends, if you have anything that hasn't been picked up or hasn't been worn, you'll take those as negative points. Hygge, or Before the Guests Arrive, is certainly not the most strategic game in Sashi and Sashi's catalog, but it is certainly the most accessible. In fact, of all the games we mentioned today, I think that this one is probably the best for families. It's a game that invites coziness in its theme and its art in either version that you get, and it doesn't take very long to play. There is the fun of taking certain items in various different colors that kids will appreciate, and a little bit of thinkiness there and strategy of which to take for adults. Overall, if you just want a nice pleasant experience in not a lot of time and in a small box, I think that you could take a look at Before the Guests Arrive or Hygge, depending on where you are. From one big Japanese publisher to another, let's give our next recommendation, and that is Whale to Look. Probably the game that out of the ones today probably takes up the most amount of room. In Whale to Look, you are all playing as tourism companies trying to get your guests to be able to see either the whale or the orca. You'll do this by having partial information and trying to guess what other people's information is, as you'll only have a certain amount of turn to glean information about how many fish there will be. The whale will be wherever the most fish is, and the orca will be wherever the least amount of fish is. So what do you do on your turn? Do you make it obvious that you just saw a card that has lots of fish and now everybody knows where all the fish is? Or did you maybe see a card that doesn't have a lot of fish and you want to move in that direction so everybody else thinks that, ooh, that must be a good spot? This almost feels like a return to form for Oink Games, a publisher that we have previously enjoyed their games of because they fit so much game in such a tiny box. And this one goes back to it. The production is outstanding, the colors are attractive, and there's a surprising amount of strategy in a game with not that much rules overhead. We have found ourselves playing this game multiple times over the course of a night, and we've enjoyed this at its various player counts and with a variety of ages. If you're looking for a game that looks as good on the table as it is satisfying to play, then I think you might take a look at Whale to Look. Staying in the sea, our next recommendation is Sea Salt and Paper, a game that actually was a bit of the hotness for a little bit of last year, and then kind of faded away for some reason. Sea Salt and Paper is a game in which you will be collecting sets every round, trying to be the first to collect 7 points. You might be doing this by pairing up fish or crabs, or you might be doing this by collecting sets of penguins or seashells. But at the end of the round, you always have an interesting choice, because if you're the first one to 7 points, you can call an end to the round. And you can give everybody else a one final turn, in which case you get bonus points if nobody's able to beat you, or you can call an end to the round immediately, in which you don't get those bonus points, but you take the sure win. Sea Salt and Paper has its fair share of criticisms, and I think a lot of them are well-founded. But for us, this is just the right kind of game we want at the end of a workday, where we don't want to learn something new, we don't want to play something that takes 2 or 3 hours or takes a long time to set up and take down. We just want a game that we can get up and going in about a minute, and then we can just have a light, pleasant time. And because of that lightness and that pleasantness, we can also take the opportunity to just kind of go about our turn while also chatting about our day. We've really enjoyed our time with Sea Salt and Paper at the end of the day, and it's even on Simachan's top 10 games of all time. Finally, we have our biggest box of the day, Dracula vs. Van Helsing from Mandu Games. In Dracula vs. Van Helsing, you have 2 players, one playing as Dracula and one playing as Van Helsing, that have different goals. It's kind of a game that rhymes with the Trick Taker and Area Control, because you will be fighting in each round for 5 different neighborhoods. Dracula is trying to convert 4 people into vampires in the same neighborhood or survive 5 rounds, whereas Van Helsing is just trying to kill Dracula. This game was actually a game that we were nervous to try because it's the spiritual successor to Jekyll vs. Hyde, a game that we weren't that thrilled about, but this one feels completely different. It's a game full of metas that will establish when you play the game with the same person over time. In the first few games, maybe 7 is the deadliest card because it allows you to change the trump suit, but then you start figuring out how to counter it with 5s that allow you to take another turn, or 6 that allows you to change cards, or maybe even the 8 when the time is right because it immediately puts an end to the round, meaning your opponent cannot change the trump suits. It's all of these little thinky decisions that, yes, while a little bit random because of the cards that you're drawing off the deck, allow for a good amount of replayability, especially when you learn how to be a good Dracula and how to be a good Van Helsing. Well, there you have it. You had a solo game, a couple games that work really well for families, and a couple games that offer a surprising amount of strategy in a little box. We hope that these recommendations have been helpful for you on your journey to find some cozy games to play in these chilly days. If you have one we didn't recommend, please leave a comment below so everybody else can find out some good games from you as well. Well, ありがとうございました. Until next time, じゃあね